Let's double your GLP-1 medication results with my favorite peptide, AOD 9604. But what you probably don't know is exactly how to use this peptide, and more importantly, how we're using it very successfully. In case you guys don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Jones. I have clinics that service across the nation. My medical practitioners prescribe and I coach. And we have the most successful platform for individuals like you on or off the GLP-1 medications, where our goal is maximizing long-term weight loss, minimizing GLP-1 side effects, minimizing complications, maximizing results. AOD is by far my favorite peptide to include into the mix. And so in this video, you guys will learn what exactly is AOD, what does it do, why it's so important for this stack, how we use it, when we use it, and the different forms that exist, like the troches and injections. And I promise this will all get done in less than 10 minutes. Okay, here we go. What exactly is AOD? AOD stands for anti-obesity drug. By the way, in the underground research peptide space, HGH frag, same thing. Although HGH frag means you didn't get it from a high quality compounding pharmacy. And I have other videos talking about that. But basically, if it didn't get prescribed from a doctor, if it doesn't come shipped to your doorstep, it's not from a 503A pharmacy. It says all over the bottles, not for human consumption. So just be safe out there. AOD is actually a fragment of the human growth hormone molecule. Growth hormone is involved in fat loss, fatty mobilization, improved protein synthesis, which can convert into either more muscular growth or more muscle preservation during weight loss, which is obviously very important, potentially improve sleep and cognitive function, a lot of good things with growth hormone. AOD is kind of like a supercharged portion of all that long list we just went over, just focusing on the fat mobilizing part of that. And I focus on that because in the beginning of your weight loss journey, we want the most concentrated help towards fat loss. And I'm sure you would agree that is your priority. We like to, shift, and a lot of our patients end up migrating towards some of the growth hormone secretagogues later on. Technically, you could do both of them at the same time, but that's something that you can speak to my providers about if you guys have any questions. So AOD, fragment of the human growth hormone. But what does it do? So AOD mobilizes body fat. What does mobilization of body fat even mean? It's like the prerequisite, the stuff that needs to happen before you can burn the fat, which means utilize the fat for energy. Before you can do all that, you have to mobilize it. You have to free up the fatty acids. On a more of a kind of granular level, this means the conversion of triglycerides, which is stored fat, activating that via many different pathways, one big one being hormone-sensitive lipase, to then cleave those triglycerides into a form that we can utilize for energy utilization, free fatty acids. And so producing the free fatty acids from stored fat, aka triglycerides, that's what fatty mobilization does. And look, it's not like you have to have AOD for your body to be able to mobilize fat. Inherently, in order for you to utilize the fat in your body has to mobilize it. And to a certain extent, it can do it. But your body's either really, really good at mobilizing fat, or it's really, really crappy. And no one's inherently good at this unless you do things that force your body to mobilize fat. So yes, eating in a deficit, but most of us aren't eating in a deficit all the time. So ketogenic diets and fasting are primarily the two biggest vehicles and drivers of challenging your body to mobilize fat stores. Yes, a little bit when you're in caloric restriction, and maybe a lot if it's massive caloric restriction, aka fasting. But the whole differences between fasting and caloric restriction, we'll save that for another video at another time. By taking AOD, and now we're on to why this is so important, you are improving the ability for your body to mobilize fat. So we've already have the research done on a short-term basis. It's all about calories. Controlling insulin, fasting and ketogenic diet technically doesn't matter on a short-term basis, which is actually true. But none of us give a shit about short-term weight loss. We're trying to think long-term and, anyways. So if you put your body into a caloric deficit, forcing it to have to mobilize the fat so that it can then utilize it, but your body is really, really bad. It does a really poor job of being able to mobilize it, the way we talked about before. Now you're putting your body into a stressful situation. And now with the word stress, you want to be thinking cortisol. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone in the body. There's a few, but it's the big one that's getting a lot more of attention in the weight loss space, because when you're suffering from chronic stress, you have chronically elevated cortisol levels. Long story short, elevated cortisol chronically leads to elevated blood glucose. Elevated blood glucose leads to elevated insulin. And you guys know that whole pathway and progression of insulin resistance. And so that's not a good thing. This is also why you might have heard why fasting can be problematic for certain people, because fasting is the most extreme version of caloric deficit. It's the most extreme version of challenging your body, even more than keto, because at least keto, you're eating food. So you're not asking to mobilize that much. It depends on what your caloric intake is. But when you're fasting, now you're asking your body to mobilize enough energy, enough fat to feed itself to eat its TDEE, requirements of energy, total daily energy expenditure, which on average, it's about 2,000 calories. And so why am I bringing all this up? What is the big scenario that creates difficulty for your body to mobilize fat stores? Now we put things together, and I have plenty of other videos talking about insulin resistance. I can promise you right now, you watching this, if you have weight to lose, you are insulin resistant. I think one of the recent statistics I saw was over 85% of Americans have some degree of metabolic dysfunction, primarily insulin resistance. And in case you didn't know, it's the progression of insulin resistance that leads to obesity. It's the progression of insulin resistance that leads towards diabetes. And it's very progressive and chronic in nature. The worse it gets, the harder it is to come out of. I wanted to interrupt the show for a minute and tell you guys about the free weight loss guide. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Essentially, what this is your GLP-1 comprehensive weight loss guide. I want you guys to minimize side effects. I want you guys to maximize results, crush those weight loss plateaus, use these medications correctly and safely. Again, I'll link to it in the show notes. Now, back to the show. And I think that's part of why there's this whole narrative out there that once you're a diabetic, you are going to be a diabetic for the rest of your life. And you know what I say about that? Bullshit. I will agree that not everybody will be able to come out of the obesity and diabetes situation, if you will, entirely, but a lot of you would do a lot better than you probably realize. Nick Norowitz, a friend of mine now, metabolic health scientists that are really starting to pave the way and validate the importance of hormones and metabolic health for long-term lasting weight loss. And so if you're insulin resistant, you have more chronically elevated insulin levels. And with that, you have this powerful storage hormone that's creating this scenario for your body that literally blocks or inhibits or prevents fatty mobilization. And so your body has to mobilize the fat because you're not eating, and for the sake of if you're fasting, right? Or if you're eating less food and you're in a calorie restriction. So your body has to do something, so it stresses out, therefore increases cortisol levels. Cortisol will get the job done no matter what. Remember, cortisol is very powerful. At the sake of various tissues in your body, cartilaginous and muscular tissue, things that you really don't want to break down regularly, but you do want to be able to break them down in an actual emergency. Short-term stress is actually healthy for the body. Okay, so now we have a deeper and more complex understanding of why AOD is so important. Now, yes, I would always argue that injections of almost any medication are going to be better than some sort of oral version. When it comes to oral, there's a pill, for example, swallowing has to go through your digestive tract, or a troche, which is something that you pop into your mouth, in between your teeth and your gum. Troches are cool because now we're not having to go through the GI tract, which is questionable at best. But now we have something that, if used correctly, can actually absorb through this tissue here called the buccomucosa. There's a lot of circulation in that area. And so troches are a very common administration method for a lot of different medications and even hormones for that matter. Yes, I would argue that if you're looking to source AOD, injections would be better, but we actually have secured a high quality version of troche dosed at the appropriate dose. So for injections, usually about 300 micrograms per day. You could do 4 months on, 1 month off, or 5 days on, 2 days off, and run that continually. The troches, I like these ones because they're dosed at 600 micrograms to account for the fact that you will have decreased absorption. But my favorite thing about it, and you guys tell me what you think, is the fact that you don't have to inject yourself every single day. You don't have to worry about the gelling issue that happens with a lot of these different AOD products out there on the market. It's clean, smooth, you pop it in there, and it builds that metabolic flexibility. It builds fat adaptation immediately, which is what we need to fuel our journey of weight loss. Takes the stress out the body so that we don't spike cortisol levels up, so that if you do have autoimmune diseases or you do have PCOS, situations where you've been told maybe fasting isn't the right thing, it's not that fasting wasn't the right thing inherently for those conditions. It's just that you were in sort of these situations where your tolerance for stress was lower. So those elevations of cortisol from fasting kind of pushed you over what I like to call a bit of a stress tolerance. And again, because I have clinics that service across the nation, we do this every single day. I can attest to the success of a protocol just like this. If you guys are curious, you want to learn more about what we do, how this program works, I'm going to link to this video right here, but I'll also put a link in our description If you want to schedule a consultation for my coaching programs, we do prescribe these peptides all across the nation, all 50 states, guys. Keep kicking ass out there, and we'll see you later.